Welcome to the Product Breakfast Club. I'm Jake in San Francisco.
Welcome to the Product Breakfast Club. That's a joke from an old episode that probably nobody remembers. I'm Jonathan in Berlin.
I'm Jake in San Francisco, I guess.
And welcome to San Francisco. It's a beautiful Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not sure which day it actually is, but I like it. I like it so far anyway. How you doing, Jake?
I'm good. I think it shows that it's morning time here and nighttime there because I know what day it is. You look like you are about ready for bed. I can see it in your eyes. No glasses for you today.
I just decided to wear some contacts because I was testing out some contacts and I just left them in and I thought maybe I look extremely sexy. I just left them in. That's it. That's the whole story.
All right. That's a good story. We'll leave it for people on YouTube to decide how sexy you are with your content.
You have to look through older episodes to see the comparison. What I also realized is 2 p.m. today, I was feeling super energetic. Yeah, I'm super excited about everything. And that would have been the perfect time to record the podcast. Not that I'm not excited right now. It's just that you catch me at a point in the day where normally people are like heading home from work. It's, 6:30 in the evening. But I'm just going to keep it up, Jake. I'm going to keep it pumped.
Keep up that energy.
Yeah.
Keep that energy pumping. Yeah.
Maybe if you could get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah. Okay. Next time.
Next episode.
Next time we'll do that. All right. Next episode. Okay. So what's up today? What are we talking about?
I have something to announce that I was supposed to announce maybe 4 episodes back, and it's almost too late to announce it now, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have a Nordic Tour coming up in Europe pretty much in like 3 weeks. And we're going to be in Helsinki. We're going to be in Copenhagen. We're going to be in Stockholm, Helsinki on the 21st of February. Copenhagen on the 26th and Stockholm on the 28th. And what we're going to be doing, or what the point of it is we're going to be doing some design sprint workshops. And I thought I had mentioned it 3 episodes back, and then I listened. I forgot.
Didn't mention it. Yeah, I forgot.
So I'm mentioning it now.
Yeah.
What's it about?
No, that's going to be fun. We're going to be doing the one-day workshop, which is a new format for us working together, and it's really good. So I'm pretty excited about it. We will probably encounter some cold weather too.
Yeah.
Yes, and up there near the Arctic Circle. I guess they're not that close to the Arctic Circle, but they're closer than I am. I thought you mentioned that you might have like a code or a coupon or something for people.
Oh, I have a code.
Yeah?
Of course.
Drop it.
Man, I have a code. I have a code ready right here. So if you use the code PBC Podcast 10, so PBC, like Product Breakfast Club, Podcast 10, you get a €100 discount, approximately €100, because basically there's a different currency in all of these countries.
Everyone has a different currency. It's crazy.
Don't ask me, man.
Crazy.
I don't know. It's crazy. It's really crazy. And the cool thing is we don't even have a website, so you can find this. So you can find all of this cool Nordic Tour stuff on the AJ&Smart Facebook page. You can just see all the upcoming events. If you use the code PBC Podcast 10, you'll get €100 off. The boot camps themselves or the workshops themselves will have like around 50 people in them. They are at this point approximately 60% sold out. So if you're interested in going that, if you're living in Europe and if you want to hang out with myself and Jake and learn about design sprints, that's going to be in February. That's the closest thing we've done to a sponsored announcement on this podcast so far.
And the advertisements are just that. We just broke the ice. Next episode, all advertisements.
Buy these shoes. Cool. So that's basically it. Nordic Tour, European Tour, and then there won't be anything in Europe for a little while. So that's the European Tour. That's it. That's basically the thing that I was supposed to mention ages ago.
Good job, though. You got it out.
Yeah, it's out. If you're living in parts of Europe like I am, living in Berlin, it's super cheap to fly over to one of these cities. Check out the Nordics. The people there, they love to hang out naked. Okay, so let's move on.
Okay, so the next topic is last week's episode, right? We were going to talk about that real quick.
I don't really feel like it. Nah, forget it. Boring. It was boring.
It was boring. No, it was not boring. It was the opposite of boring. It was amazing. If you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to last week's,
dump this.
I don't know what's going to happen this episode, but you should probably go back and check that one out. It was great. We had Jason Fried, CEO, founder of Basecamp, excellent writer, tweeter, mediumer, nice guy, as it turns out, on the pod here.
On the pod.
Talking about his tweet. We had talked about it a while ago, and then we just went from there. And we got advice from Jason. We got writing advice. We got business advice. We got life advice. We got everything.
One thing that really stood out, We were talking about user research and the fact that Basecamp doesn't do user research at all, and they just get their product out there and they don't consider it to be an iteration, or they don't consider it to be real results. Everything is simulated until it's really on the market. And actually today they released that redesign he was talking about in last week's episode. And man, it is fucking terrible. It's embarrassing that we interviewed him. No, I'm only joking. It's great. It's lovely. That's the thing, right? They just got that out there. They didn't test it with people. They're going to now, start iterating on it. And I thought what was super interesting is his take on that is they could spend the time planning the research sessions, recruiting the users, setting up the room, all this kind of stuff. But instead, they're optimizing for speed. At least from his perspective, he doesn't want to lose time trying to figure out what could be wrong with this product or what could be the direction they should take. Rather, get it out there and then see what just happens on the market, because the market is the only thing that matters anyway. I think it's maybe a bit too extreme for some companies to do that. And at AJ&Smart, we do research in the sprint itself, as you know. But it really got me thinking, are you going to end up with a better product? Let's say two companies, company A and company B, have 1 year to bring out the same product, right? The same idea. Let's say company A, they do it the traditional design way, the design thinking where they do the upfront research, the mood boards and everything, and just really building up to it. And then they release the first version of it in September. Let's say they started in January. They released the first version of it in September.
Okay, so 9 months. They got 9 months.
They take 9 months.
But they've got mood boards.
Yeah, and in between, they tested it with their potential customers. They showed them things. They asked them questions. And they iterated internally in that way, right? So that's actually, I think, the more traditional way of creating a product. Let's say now company B, and let's say B for Basecamp. Hey.
Oh,
I know. Now let's say they release it after 4 months instead of 9 months. They get a lot of bad feedback. They start iterating on it live. I think the company, let's say both of them at the end of the year, both of them in December, I think company B has a better chance of success than company A because they actually had the real product on the real market with real users for a longer time. I genuinely believe, and especially after listening to Jason, and I know this is something a lot of people do not believe in, and I know there's a lot of what ifs on the side, but in that case, I really do believe that company B has a better chance of success on the market. And I'm not talking about company B has a better UX design or something like that. I just mean that company B has a better chance of having a better product that makes them more money and does what they actually wanted to do.
My thought on it would be that company D.
Oh, where's C?
Who ran a design sprint. Who started with a couple design sprints and then had the confidence to launch in 4 months. Because I think for most companies, they can't flip in to that Basecamp mode. And we more or less, I think you're right. A lot of the time that goes into developing products, a lot of the wishy-washy stuff that happens is unnecessary. But I don't think that just by going fast, by launching fast, for most companies, I'm not sure that will get them to success. There's downsides to launching fast if you're way off. A lot of teams do end up being way off. One of my big takeaways from Jason was they are outliers. Basecamp are outliers, and they've intentionally made themselves outliers. I mean, both they started off DHH and Jason, they're amazing. They're super talented guys, but they also have made all of these intentional decisions over time to grow slow, to do things in a different way that has just reinforced them as outliers. And they have a ton of expertise. They're working with a team that's worked together a lot, right? They've worked together for years. They're very good. They either started with good people or they started with people who are young and then they built them up, whatever. They're awesome. I just think that for other teams looking at that, they probably need to figure out, okay, how do we realistically get there? It made me actually upon reflection and upon re-listening to the episode, it made me feel really good about the design sprint as a catalyst for teams to start to shift the way they think about how fast they can possibly move. Because I think if a team just says we're going to move that launch date up and that nothing else, I've seen a lot of teams do that. And that often doesn't go well. Ship half a product, not a half-assed product. What you usually see when people move the deadline up is they just ship a half-assed product. And so that's kind of the key is getting that confidence, that resolve, that excitement, staying authentic, gathering momentum. I think a sprint is a great way to start. So upon reflection, that was one thing I took away.
Let me play the devil's advocate here. Okay. So especially I agree with the fact that you should release half a product instead of a half-assed product. So that's all about scoping. It's about coming up with the right scope before you actually bring the product to the market. However, let's say a company does do a half-assed product. Let's say company B brings out a half-assed product in May or whatever. So what? If they can iterate faster than the other company, I still think they're going to get ahead of the other company. They still have 4 months or 5 months to catch up on the bullshit the other company's doing. Come on, man. Hit me.
First of all, okay, I'm going to hit you right back. First thing I'm going to hit you with is devil's advocate. Don't say you're playing devil's advocate. Just argue with me.
The problem is I agree with you because we do the design sprint here at AJ&Smart too.
Okay. The big thing is this. Launching is costly in ways that people often do not anticipate. And this is something that my former colleague, Braden Coates, used to say. I realized like he was right. He described it as like, it's like a ratchet. Like once you launch, it is very hard to go back. And the reasons why, there's a bunch of them. So one of them is your product gets out in the real world and some number of people are going to really like it, even if it's kind of a piece. Like there's probably going to be some portion of your customers who love it. And then it becomes hard to take it back. So let's say you launch something, it's a disaster for many customers. That may hurt your brand. That may hurt your like early adopters, your chances of getting early adopters excited. But then you also have probably this subsection of people who do get excited about it and then are kind of like up in arms, bring out the pitchforks about you bringing it back in. And this problem, I think, is especially heightened when you already have like a big product that people know something about. This was something we used to be very cognizant of. If you're launching something on Gmail, for instance, like if you have a lot of customers, like some of them are may fall in love with this new weird thing, and then it's hard to bring it back. The other part of it is that you spend a lot on the launch itself. You are spending maybe some of your limited bullets with reporters, getting them to write about it if you're trying to get stories in the press, or maybe you're burning up some, like it costs money to put together an advertising campaign. If you're running Instagram ads or whatever you're doing, like that might cost you something. And again, like if you're a small company launching and you only have like a few customers, especially if you're like doing an enterprise thing, you may not be able to like get the launch wrong. And this is something I think Jason was really open about, that the same thing doesn't work for every kind of company. You got to think about the cost of the launch. And the cost of the launch, the idea that you can throw out a piece of crap and then iterate your way in the real world to something good and still be okay, is true in some instances. But it's only in instances where you're launching to people who are really, you have a bazillion potential customers, or the customers you're launching to are like, they're just going to roll with it and they're okay with dealing with something that's a bit busted.
I think there's a flaw in the launch plan there as well, though. If you've heard of a soft launch, I'm assuming, if you actually control the amount of people who are going to be exposed to this first version of it. For example, we've launched products, or we've helped company and recommended that companies launch product in regions where it might not be the most popular, or maybe that's not where the most customers are. I mean, I don't know if you know that Ireland, my home country, is basically the launch pad for almost everything that all these big Silicon Valley companies do, because we speak English. And to be honest, it's not that big a market.
I think it's questionable whether you speak English. I mean, it's close. It's close.
How's it going, boss? How you doing? It's what they do, and even German companies here that we work with, they'll launch in Ireland, or they'll launch in a small region, or like they'll launch somewhere.
Still costly. Still takes a lot of attention. You got to think about, you got to bug testing.
Yeah.
You're like, what's the marketing plan? What's the strategy? Now, okay, you're right. Like you can learn from that, but it is not free.
It's also not free to have your designers sitting around for an extra 4 months working on it. That's the thing. You might be creating waste in the version where it's not on the market, but you may actually avoid creating waste by getting the first version out there that kind of sucks. And then you really learn what you actually need to make. So that's the argument. Is it that you get it out there faster? I know how much these things cost, and I know they do cost a lot. But to be honest, they very often don't cost as much as having a design and development team and strategy team and business team sitting around for an extra 4 to 5 months fucking around with stuff that they don't understand yet.
Well, here's the other thing. The whole conversation was kind of like, man, like, are design sprints even necessary, or should you just move faster? Should everybody just be moving faster? And part of my rekindling of excitement about design sprints with all this is I was thinking that the other mindset shift a team needs to have to go from being like more of like a traditional takes longer to launch team, or a team that moves fast but it's not that in touch with their customers, there's a lot of those, or a team that doesn't have good insight. It takes a lot of time, and none of us will probably ever get to have as good a product insight as Jason Fried has, but we can, aspire to get better at our product sense. And a lot of that comes from, I think, a lot of the goodness in the sprint and the design sprint is kind of framing what are the questions you're trying to answer with this experiment, that you do within the confines of the sprint. But what I've seen a lot of teams do is take that mindset and keep it as they continue on. And they're like, okay, those same sprint questions we had, we need to keep those around. We need to maybe continue to add to that list. And then maybe when you launch, when you do that soft launch or that early launch or whatever it is, you're really being aware of the questions you're trying to answer, and you're in still an experimental mindset. And that, I think, can make the soft launch, the early launch successful. The team has to be still in that learning mode. They have to be ready and receptive. And they also have to be feeling like you can listen and change your mind. It's okay to break something. It's okay to change something, to redesign something, whatever. The longer you take to launch, the more you calcify in your opinion of what the product is, the harder it is to listen to that feedback. And 4 months is plenty of time to calcify if you didn't start with a learning mindset.
I want to go a little bit deeper because I think it's a fundamental argument. I started a Facebook group last week called Innovation Hackers, and I started on Wednesday last week, and there are only around 200 and something people in there. There are crazy conversations going on in there. It's like these kind of very passionate conversations about products, really interesting people in there as well, like a lot of CEOs and VPs of companies who are building products having extremely passionate and interesting conversations. The one thing that I found interesting about that is that's never happened on any of our social media platforms.
How did you seed that?
I think the first thing I posted was I copied and pasted one of my articles from Medium about user research. And it wasn't the really crazy one. It was just about launching faster, whatever. Posted it in there, added a few more comments to it.
So it wasn't user research as a waste of time. It was just like user research might be not the best use of time.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. It's a comment every minute since Wednesday last week. Wow. Long form, full article length comments. It's totally crazy. And the reason why I say that this conversation is like a fundamental core issue of everything related to product design, it's because really it doesn't matter what I talk about or where I go or which country I'm in, what the problem is. This topic comes up about like how much upfront work should we be doing? When are we ready for launch? What's the real value of user research? This system versus that system. It's super fundamental. And it's something they should be discussing. And they shouldn't be relying on defaults. And that's something you talk about as well. I'm a 100% believer that the sprint is the fastest way to start anything. If it's a new feature, we use a sprint. If it's a brand new product, we start with a sprint. I think it's the best way to align a team before they get going. It's like the best boost you can give them. So I'm absolutely not against that. And I love doing the user research on the Thursday, even if the research itself doesn't really mean anything sometimes. It's like the team has seen what people have said and you get grounded in reality immediately. The default thing to do is to build the MVP and to scope out the MVP, the minimum viable product. And you're already limiting yourself in that case. As you said, like the default is the MVP. But if you use the sprint, and especially if you just say like, let's just do like 2 sprints at the very start, you get to try a lot of options. And by doing that, even if you have to pull back like 50%, I think you have a better outcome than starting with the MVP in mind from day one. You really get to look at the bigger product vision when you do the sprint. And I think that helps to guide the team sometimes even more than doing all of this upfront research, just having this vision that came out of the first or second sprint. So I agree with you on the sprint stuff, not just because you wrote the book, but
not just because there's a poster of me on the whiteboard behind you, looking over your shoulder. Yeah.
Jake told me to put that up, okay? So
I don't. It's interesting, though. The whole thing is interesting to me because I just set up recently, a couple of months ago, a Slack community for sprints. We're talking about design sprints. And I asked a good friend of mine to figure out how to set up the Slack community and what he thought would be the best way to do it. And after researching it a bit, he said, you really should make it open, but charge people. And that will sort of ensure that the people who are in there like really into it, just as like make a little bit of a hurdle to getting in. And I have been also really surprised by the quality of the conversations in there. And it's just sort of random people, it's seeded a bit with people from workshops, it's people from your team who are in there. And of course, I'm in there. But it's really interesting to see how those conversations take on a life of their own and how much I learn from actually hearing other people talk. Of course, I'm chiming in and stuff. But I have been thinking should it be closed? Should it be just like open and free? Like, what's the right thing? Like, how do you know if it's worth people's money, or do you just make it private, invite only if you want it to be closed? I don't know the right way to do that. So it's interesting. So yours is invite only, like it's closed and you just like have added people who you know?
No, it's a closed group. Maybe you can test this out right now. I think you can go to Facebook, type in Innovation Hackers, and you can request to join it. And then I personally have to say yes to that. Basically, this was part of a test we did last week, an experiment. We had a guy come in to do like a social media community building workshop with us. And one of the things he said is like, you have to have a Facebook group. And I was like, I started Facebook groups before, nothing really happened. And he was just like, that's because you didn't take it seriously. You used it as a side project. Did you post on it every day? Did you actually take care to start real conversations? And I was like, nah, not really. And actually what he told us was like, stop wasting your time posting stuff to the Facebook feed. Just focus on having a super engaged group. We created the group. We even created like a custom video. When you go in there, you can see like us talking about what the group is. The focus on it is like to share learnings about product processes and innovation processes. We're not like, going through everyone's profiles, but we are kicking anyone out who's like posting BS. We're kicking anyone out who hasn't used it for more than a month. The quality of the conversations, I've just been completely shocked. And what I'm going to try to do then is like, at least in my mind, a cool idea would be doing like live streams just for those group members. I personally don't really feel like Slack is like a channel to discuss the things that we're trying to discuss, like in your case, the design sprint. And the reason is somehow it feels too much like work to me because I'm using Slack as my work product. And I also feel like Slack is extremely throwaway and I don't really pay attention to it. Like, it's just like tap, 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 enter. It feels like I don't have to deliberately access it. Whereas the Facebook group, and by the way, I hate Facebook and I don't use Facebook as an individual, just the way it's organized, the way the notifications work, the way the threading is working, and the way you kind of have the most recent and most popular conversations pushed to the top. That's super important. On Slack, I go into the design sprint Slack maybe once a day, right? I have no idea what's after happening. And I'm like, okay, stuff happened. And in the Facebook group, one of the posts I had on Thursday last week that got super popular is still like number 2 when you scroll down. So it's just made in a way that's easier to scan and easier to jump right into the conversation. I think I made it free. You can monetize a Facebook group, but I made it free because I don't know what type of conversations I want to be having in there yet. And for me, it's as much a learning experience as the people who are kind of going to join in. So it's not like a big AJ&Smart beast. It's kind of like a total experimental group thing that has completely exploded in the last few days.
It's an interesting example of what we were talking about before with launching things and the cost of launching things. There's a cost to launching the thing on Slack and setting up payments, because if you set it up with payments, then you have then set the precedent to it's very hard to add payments in the future. If you decide that's an important wall. And to be honest with you, I don't really care if it makes a lot of money, but I do care that it's people who are serious in there. I think it's hard to charge for something when it's been free in the past. And I think people should feel okay about charging money for something, and it's okay to charge money. And I think that holds you to a higher level of accountability in terms of you need to provide something of value. If you're asking people to pay for it, it makes you take your own time more seriously. So I think that all that is okay. But once you launch something, we launch this thing on Slack, then you have to say okay, well, if that was the wrong platform, if charging for it was the wrong move, it's not easy to unwind that. It's doable, but it's not easy. And some number of people, I'm sure, would love that it's on Slack. They prefer Slack to Facebook. So you do, this is an example. I mean, I think I'll check out what you're doing and, think about it. This will be an ongoing process, but it is an interesting, concrete example of how when you launch, those decisions can be a little sticky, even if it feels like, it's just, I can change it later. It's hard. It's not easy.
For us, it all happened in the space of 20 minutes. The guy came and said, we were talking about something completely different. We were talking about Facebook ads. We were talking about the YouTube channel. And he was like, you could post it in your Facebook group. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't have one. And he's like, you need one. Make one right now. And I was like, what should it be called? I was like, Innovation Hackers. And then done, literally used a product called Canva, which just makes Facebook graphics. Wrote Innovation Hackers in there. Started it within 20 minutes. It was already online. Within 30 minutes, there was already people in there because I started with inviting people from the AJ&Smart page. By the end of the day, it was already the most engaged group. It's growing really crazy right now without doing much. Just the zero friction was a huge help.
Now, see, the zero friction is like a concern of mine with Facebook because I did think about Facebook for this, and I'm always hesitant to use Facebook for something because
I hate Facebook.
you're encouraging people to go into a place that to me is like a waste of time. And it's not, some people get a lot out of Facebook and whatever, but to me, it's a waste of time. And I hate to lure somebody else into a place where they're going to be bombarded with like notifications for random stuff. Like I continue to really like the fact that, hey, if you had a question about the design sprint thing and you went into the Slack channel, that is all that is going on in there. Of course, you make a point that now you're just in Slack and you might be reminded to open up your own company's Slack, but it is at least thesprintbook.slack.com is only about that. So
my favorite way of doing it is actually Instagram. So Instagram is like my social media home. And I'll give you a good example. Today, somebody asked me about selling the sprint and like, how do you convince clients who are like unconvinced about the results? And for me, I don't even have to write it. I just tap the camera button. I say exactly I make a quick selfie video to this person, sent, done. And that for me is like the least absolute zero friction way of talking to people. The problem is you're doing it one-on-one then, and you have to be okay with that. But for me, it's like super satisfying just on my own Instagram account to answer those questions. It's very human. It's super easy.
Yeah. It's a bit more human, right? It's a bit
Humans.
faster. Well, actually, that's a good segue to the topic of the Medium post, the topic from Jason about humanity. No, about being fast and being authentic. When we interviewed Jason, we knew that we're not going to try to get any gotcha questions or trick him or anything. We were kind of trying to selfishly get some tips from Mr. Jason Fried. And one of the things I wanted to learn from him was how he approaches writing. The guy is a great writer. He has I think, unique style and how crisp and short he is. I always read his Medium posts and I start to scroll down and then it ends. He's just the shortest, most concise argument maker out there. I mean, he's been blogging since probably 99. Maybe he's probably writing before then. So he's got a ton of experience, but he's also really good and really thoughtful about it. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is in an earlier episode of this podcast, we were trying to imagine what was he thinking when he tweeted this tweet about shipping, iterating, about not doing user testing. And talking to him, I was like, wow, he's not playing three-dimensional chess with his brand, his personal brand, or how he should message to which of his readers or whatever. He's just writing what's on his mind. And he's mostly talking to himself. That was what he said. I think that came across as very believable to me, that he's just writing fast and he tries to limit his Medium posts to 15 or 20 minutes. And he just writes it, sends it out there. And if he changes his mind later, or if he was wrong or offended someone, he's like, well, people will forget it or move on. It's just we're having a live conversation right now and we can't do over and go back. It just happens. And that was really fascinating to me. It was not what I would have expected. Usually it takes a ton of work to make something short. So I thought that he was spending a lot of time sort of wordsmithing those posts. I think largely that's because he's really good. He's able to go that fast and make them concise and good. I'm aware that I can't just make something short and good really quickly, but I was inspired to try writing shorter posts and to see, I think, whether you are talking about yourself as an individual, as a writer, or you're talking about a company making a product and trying to make it unique and trying to express what's special about their own product, or you're marketing, or whatever you're doing, you're trying to tell a story. We're all trying to tell different stories about products, about ourselves, or whatever. And it's hard to do that in an authentic way. And what Jason was saying that was so interesting to me is the faster you move, the less you'll second guess, the better the chance that that thing comes out of your mouth, comes out of your keyboard, or the product comes out of your company and is authentic and still has an opinion to it. That was pretty cool. And yeah, I'd committed to writing some Medium posts fast to try to see what it was like to move that fast.
I actually would love you to talk about the speed versus authenticity article that you wrote, because I think it could be interesting for our listeners, Jake.
Yeah, well, I got a 20-minute timer here, which is, I love it. This is a new one.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, so good. And it's even sprint blue there. I set it to, 15 minutes. And I'm like, I'm going to write a post in 15 minutes. I'm just going to write on this topic. And it was an interesting feeling. That post, I feel good about a post if it reaches a certain number of views. I kind of think okay, that one seems to have resonated with people. And if a post gets to 10,000, I feel like that was really good. 10,000 views was good. And then if it goes more than that, that's amazing. Most of my posts don't get that high. And I think you got to write a lot because I can never predict which ones are actually going to hit. It's actually kind of hard to know in advance.
Sounds like the market is deciding which ones are interesting and which ones are not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. Yeah. So, this post that I wrote in 15 minutes, it's gotten so far maybe like 1,000 views or something. So it's not a huge smash hit. But what it did do for me was it just made me reframe the way I've got this backlog of posts, things I could write about. And I have a certain standard for what kind of level of polish I want to give to something I write before I put it out there. And part of that is because when you first start writing and you want to make it good, you need to do a lot of editing. And I ended up, as you write books, once the book is out there, there's no version 1.1 of the book. Like, it's printed on paper, it's in the Kindle, like, you can't change it. For the foreseeable future, you are locked into what you print, and you have to be really, really careful. And that also encourages you to be cautious about the way you write. Jason even talked about that in his interview, because they're writing a new book and working with a publisher. So I realized that maybe like a lot of those like first habits and those habits from writing books are kind of stuck with me. And when I write a Medium post, maybe I could dial some of that stuff back and be a little looser. And I just finished writing one book. I just finished editing, doing a big revision on this novel that I've been working on forever. And I'm just starting a new novel. And I thought, man, actually, it's hard to start a book from scratch, especially like fiction. I mean, you sort of have a plan, but not in the same way, not the same amount of confidence that you'd have with a nonfiction book. So maybe I can just try to go a little faster, try to be in a different mode as I'm starting to write and experiment with that, just kind of play with it. The post was like just me talking about this idea at a super high level, which is that when you slow down, you second guess yourself. When I slow down, I might edit the goodness out. And worst of all, I might not ever even get around to saying the thing because I'm like, oh, I need to set aside 2-3 hours, to get it going. I'm going to experiment with it. I still believe, and I've told you this, if you write too fast and you don't refine it at the end, then you do yourself a disservice. Sometimes you do the idea a disservice. But the Jason Fried model, I think, is make the post really short. So that's the other idea. Is like in 15 minutes, I'm going to try to have drafted most of it in 10. And so I have 5 or 10 more minutes just to edit and tighten it up. And then it can't be very long. I'll write a few more in this style. I wrote one for this project called Pastry Box. If you search for Pastry Box, it's like this little post that designers and people like that write. That one will be published sometime the next week or two. I'll continue to write a few more like this and just see what I can learn from it.
I haven't written a Medium article in about 2 months or 3 months or something. I've been super lazy about it. And honestly, writing, I don't love writing. Basically, I don't love writing. I really love making the videos on YouTube. I love making the videos on Instagram. All that kind of stuff. Just don't love writing. However, I'm going to write my first exercise. Like, I have a new exercise, Jake. You remember Lightning Decision Jam? That bad boy?
I do remember.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know Lightning Decision Jam, it's like this, basically like a 1-hour problem solving and decision making exercise that takes the principles of the design sprint, boils it down to 1 hour, and you can do it with almost any amount of people from like 4 to like 120. Actually, Michael, my co-founder, is in Mallorca today doing Lightning Decision Jam with like 100 people. But I needed a new exercise this weekend because I was trying to sort my own stuff out, trying to streamline the podcast. And I realized I didn't have any like Lightning Decision Jam for just me on my own that doesn't take an hour. And so I came up with a new exercise, which I tested on an employee today. And it seems to be a nice one. It's basically like a one-person problem-solving exercise that puts things into perspective and shows you how to do them easier. I need a name for it, Jake. I need a name.
Oh, I'm eager to see this one. Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's name it live. What happens in it?
Here's the idea. So for me, one of the most life-changing quotes that I've read in the last 2 years, and it's always cliche when it's me.
It was in the sprint book, wasn't it?
It was in the sprint book. Yeah, no. It was actually from Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss's book, and subsequent podcasts. I'm always bringing up that book. There was a chapter which talked about the most important questions in his life, right? The questions that he asks himself when he ever gets stuck or whatever, or he asks himself these questions every few months or et cetera, et cetera. And one of those questions is, what would this look like if it were easy? And I think that's a huge deal if you really think about it. This time last year, I read that book. That question didn't stand out for me. I didn't really notice it, but I've gone back to it in the last 2 months and realized that this question is super important. And I'll give you an example of what it means. So if I'm looking at the podcast, I'm thinking, oh, shit, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to sit down for an hour, I have to export. There's a lot of work on this side for the podcast, not just the recording. There's like,
seems easy.
Yeah, it seems really easy. Yeah, so there's a lot of little tasks that have been bugging me about it that make me not enjoy the process of doing it. And so I sat down on Saturday and I had that question written down. What would it look like if this were easy? And out of that question, I started writing, okay, I wouldn't have to export it. I wouldn't have to edit the video. I wouldn't have to write the description. I wouldn't have to upload it to SoundCloud. Like all of the things that in an easy world, the only thing I would do is talk to you, right? That's it.
Even that's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, even that's a pain in the ass. Exactly. You do try to go as far as you can. So you say, I wouldn't do the podcast. Like that's even something you would write. So you try to go.
I would do it. I would. I enjoy it.
Yeah, you could do it. You could do it for me. But the point is, right, I listed all those things out. I actually put like how much time each of these tasks was taking me next to it. And one of them stuck out for me. The most annoying task for me is when we stop recording, I export the audio from this video and then I export the video in a different format so that it's YouTube ready. And then when it's exported after like 15 minutes, I put it into a Dropbox folder to be edited by the editors. And I have two different editors, one person for the audio, one person for the video. And so then I have to coordinate with them over Slack and whatever. Hey, Jason. All of these are tiny tasks, but they take up a lot of time when it comes down to it, right? And so I circled the exporting of the video one. And then I got a separate page and I wrote, what would the world have to look like for me not to have to do this task? And so I wrote down all the little things and I realized, seriously, like 3 bullet points into it, I was like, wait a second, this is so easy. I don't have to do this at all. All I needed to do was change the export path. Basically today, when I press stop here today, everything that I've been spending 30, 40 minutes doing is going to happen automatically just because I changed one setting in Ecamm Call Recorder and one setting in Zencaster and invited our video editor to the Dropbox where all the audio files get dumped. I did like 3 tasks and I know now I'm going to finish this call and have to do absolutely nothing. It's amazing. And this exercise is after coming from that. So the idea behind the exercise is that you can identify areas of friction in your life based on the things that you're doing, and then you can solve them on the spot. Essentially what it does is points out where there are like these areas of friction where there just doesn't need to be. Often you build these areas of friction yourself. And I think people don't realize that. They think that, you know, their lives are super optimized. They're like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this. And I'm like, wait a second, why don't you just like do this? Sometimes a third party can point something out to you and you're like, oh, of course, like I've been really stupid.
Totally. Yeah.
And this is an exercise so that you can point out these stupid inefficiencies to yourself and it works.
Wow.
It's a stationary question. So the same with Lightning Decision Jam. It was like, how many different types of Post-its will I need? How does every round work?
Yeah. At the end, what do you have? What's the output that you get? And how long does it take?
It takes 15 minutes, which is amazing.
Okay.
And at the end, you have a really clear step-by-step solution. My problem that I wanted to focus on was the video export. And you have a solution to solve that, either to completely cut that time out and you don't have to do it anymore, or like a much more efficient way to do it so that you cut 20 minutes down to 10 minutes or something like that.
What could you apply this thing to? What's the range of stuff?
You could apply it to anything underneath the categories of like health, wealth, love, life, family, whatever. So health, let's take health. Let's say working out. Let's be selfish. If you're doing this on your own, I want to be more muscly. Okay.
Speak for yourself, John. I'm already as muscly as
exactly.
Possible. So
exactly. So
I guess I can't imagine what that would be like to want to be more muscly, but
exactly.
That's your reality. That's fine.
Just get pumped. So what would it look like if it were easy for me to get muscly? Okay. That's like a weird example that you can just choose whatever you want. And in that case, you might write, go to the gym more often. That's a stupid thing because you won't actually do it. Maybe like make a bet with a friend so that you actually do it. Or wait a second, get a personal trainer and pay a lot of money and then be forced to do it. If it's about the eating problem, you write down, okay, look for a service that sends you high protein meals. I don't know. You just need to write down like all of the things that would make this world easier. Have a home gym. Like you're just looking to avoid having to do the high friction thing. And I did it. I didn't write down be more muscly. It was get more fit. Although to be really honest, Jake, I was trying to get extremely pumped. I did that over Christmas. I did the exercise. It was a different form. And that's why I'm now back with a personal trainer, which I hadn't been doing for the last like 8 months. And seriously, the difference is insane. Like really, I would never push myself that much and I would never go to the gym regularly.
I have named this exercise for you while you were talking.
What's it called?
Shortcut-o-matic.
Shortcut-o-matic. I like that. Yeah. It's really about shortcuts. That's such a good name.
It's just shortcuts. Yeah. And then the o-matic part It's going to make it a little sticky. People are going to be like, oh man, I'm feeling really down about my
That's so good.
blank. My podcast is bumming me out, or like my love life is bumming me out, or hey, you know what, man? You need a shortcut-o-matic. Hey, come on over here. I got some Post-it notes for you. We're going to shortcut-o-matic.
I'm not actually joking. I love the framing that it's about shortcuts.
I'm not joking about that. I think it's great. It's a noun. It's a verb. It's shortcuts.
I'm definitely going to use that.
All right.
That's really great. I think in the Lightning Decision Jam exercise, the reason it's called Lightning Decision Jam is because you told me that the name of my first exercise, applied user story mapping, was so shitty. So yeah, thanks for that, Jake.
You have really good ideas, but your branding,
terrible. I don't have good ideas, Jake. I execute well. Let's not talk about ideas on the show, man.
I didn't say that you executed well.
No, you did. You said that. All right, great. So just for people listening, so I think a lot of people, we got a lot of new subscribers because of the Jason Fried episode. If you're listening to this now and you're wondering, like, where's the guest? You know, is this just these two dickheads talking to each other? The Product Breakfast Club podcast is mostly myself and Jake discussing. It's not one of those Tim Ferriss style guest shows. It's not supposed to be a super serious, you know, you're standing there taking notes the entire episode. You're listening into the conversation that myself and Jake were having anyway when we used to just do these calls. We enjoy doing this. We learn from each other. Any guest that we bring in, we want to learn from. We're not doing this so that we can get like sponsors like Squarespace or something like this, or like 2,000 million listeners. We're looking for people who enjoy listening to maybe kind of relatively high level product design, innovation, process conversations. It's just not a guest show. We have a couple of guests coming up, but it's not like the normal mode of this podcast at all.
We've launched and iterated. I should say we're trying to make like the sound quality good. We're trying to make the structure good. We are trying to make it better and better. So you had me listen to Giant Bombcast. That's a rambling podcast
3 hours
example, because everybody talks about these interview shows. That's not us, but occasionally we'll bring on some good folks. Yeah, Giant Bombcast is a rambler. I like My Brother and Me. That's kind of a bit of a rambler with some light structure. Giant Bombcast, Vergecast, you turn me on to, those are good. Giant Bombcast, I'm not into video games enough to really get into that one.
That's your own problem, man.
Yeah, it might be your problem.
Maybe it
actually.
is.
But but that kind of thing I think can work. And hopefully if you're listening still, we're going to keep having conversations like this. So
yeah, I enjoyed this one. It was like, I felt like I got to vent a little bit because I've been typing these things that I've been saying all week in that Innovation Hackers group, like super passionately typing, like, but I needed to shout it somehow. Like based on the topic that we spoke about today, which was speed over potentially consistency, speed over potentially user research, speed over being sure, and speed to avoid losing your authenticity. Jake, talk to me. What would be a piece of advice you would give a team in a company? It can be a startup or it can be a Fortune 500. They're just about to embark on a new product. They have like a basic, business idea of what this product is supposed to do. I'm assuming you're just going to say design sprint.
It's going to be hard not to say that, because I would say, well, two things, I guess. There's a new idea in my head after we've been talking to Jason Fried. I'll be honest with you. We mentioned at the top of the episode last time about how you and I both went back and reread some of those books, right? Like you reread Rework. I was rereading Getting Real. And I thought, man, like a lot of my philosophy it was really formative for me to read that book way back when. And I think lately I've not thought as much about what they're doing. And I haven't thought as much about the 6-week cycle that they do now. But of course, they're so intentional about process. I have been thinking a lot about how a team could push themselves to get closer to 6 weeks, whether they're doing an MVP or whether they're doing sort of a longer launch cycle. I think that the idea that you could start with 2 sprints, which we know works really well. If you do 1 sprint and then you do like a couple days, like sort of a micro follow-up sprint to refine and test your prototype, teams are moving fast. They're in this learning mindset. If you then don't have a super long way to go before you get to the finish line of a launch and get it out into the real world, because I 100% agree that the things you learn when the product is out in the real world are different That's kind of the advice I'm leaning towards giving people now is like, look, can you sprint now? That's going to teach you kind of how to move fast. That's going to teach you what really matters about what you're building. That's a more realistic thing to tell people to do than to say, hey, change what you're doing and ship in 6 weeks. Like, I think that's going to be tough for most teams. But start with those 2 sprints and then have a conversation. Don't have it before you sprint. Have it after you sprinted. Say like, okay, what could we launch in 6 weeks? What would it look like to get this out in front of like real customers in 6 weeks? I think that's pretty interesting. And I want to start doing that with companies, start pushing companies to at least have that conversation, which is a low cost conversation to have at that point. Because I suspect that the game has changed after you do 2 sprints, and you might be able to start changing your whole shipping culture, which is kind of a crazy idea, but I think it'd be cool.
Jake, I'm going to be visiting a company next week. Really, really cool brand. Everybody loves them. And they're going to be coming on this podcast pretty soon to talk about how using sprints instead of their normal process completely changed everything that they did. So this is going to be something that we're going to be able to follow up with in a few weeks.
Oh, I think I know. Oh my God. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm super excited about that. So, Jake, I think that's really cool information. It was really fun chatting to you, dude. I think it was really nice also to not have a guest because I felt like there was a buildup of shouting at each other that needed to be done.
You know what? I meant to say this. We caved a little bit. We did not argue with
Oh
Jason
my
Fried
God.
at all. And I don't know if somebody who listened to us talking about his tweet and then listened to us interviewing him would thought those guys caved. But you got to understand, like, it was so cool to talk to him. I felt like we learned more by not arguing with him, but I want to have him back on and try to argue with him. Although I feel like his combination of like niceness and good arguments might destroy us.
So I got an email yesterday from somebody who will remain nameless. No, a person I really like and respect. He said that episode was weird. The people at AJ&Smart, almost every single person I've met at AJ&Smart was like, wow, Jonathan, you were really quiet. First of all, look, yes, I was nervous. Second of all, Jason is like 10,000 steps up the food chain from me. He has nothing to learn from me. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to have him, as long as I can keep him talking and just like get all the advice I possibly can. That's it. Like I wasn't in this episode. Like we said, this podcast is a selfish thing. We're doing it for ourselves. I was just listening and taking notes. I listened back to that episode and I was like, I am stealing all of this for myself and I'm going to say it to my customers. As you can hear, we are not quiet usually, but that was a special moment, you know?
I mean, it was kind of weird, right? Like we just started doing this podcast and all of a sudden like Jason was like, sure, I'll come on the podcast. We almost like jokingly were like, hey, you know? And so we're like, whoa, like careful what you wish for. Now we've got him on the podcast. Pretty cool. If you get the chance to talk to somebody who you really admire, you should mostly listen. Like you should mostly be asking them just enough questions to steer them to talk about the things you want to talk about, which it's the selfish thing to do, but it probably didn't make us look like especially smart. That's okay. I think it's the right thing to do. I think as we keep interviewing people, we'll probably want to keep doing that. I want to learn from people and it would be fun to have some arguments though. We'll have to figure it out.
Jake Knapp, New York Times best-selling author of Sprint. Where can people find you online?
They can find me online at jakeknapp.com and on Twitter at JakeK, Jakek. Where Jonathan, design agency founder, CEO, writer of blog posts that can help you get things done, owner of the Innovation Hackers Facebook group.
I'm the owner of a Facebook group. Thanks a lot, Jake.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, actually, normally I would say at JIceCream on Instagram because Instagram is really the thing I check the most. I never check Twitter, but people still contact me there and I'm like, I see it after 2 weeks. So Instagram is definitely my favorite place at JIceCream. But actually, for the next few weeks at least, I'm going to be checking out that Innovation Hackers group on Facebook. We're going to be doing a couple of live streams there. And so instead of writing, what I do is I just post YouTube videos. So YouTube, AJ&Smart, that's where all of my product design advice is. That's where you can find this podcast in video format. That's pretty much it, I would say. Just one more little reminder. Myself and Jake are going to be in Europe end of February, I can't say that word, on our Nordic Design Sprint workshop tour.
February.
February. So Nordic Tour and 3 workshops, all within pretty much the same week. And if you want €100 off, they're already pretty cheap, to be honest. To be really honest, So it's €100 off. It's PBC Podcast 10. And you can find the links to the workshops on the AJ&Smart Facebook page or ajsmart.com/events.
Helsinki, Copenhagen, Stockholm.
And definitely don't feel shy. Come up and say hi to us at the workshops. We're super happy to chat. And usually we have plenty of time afterwards for a few drinks and chats anyway. Yeah, we'd love to also meet you lovely people in person. Jake, have a really good day. Bye-bye.
See ya.